Hello everybody, Lord Almighty here. Today is Saturday, April 28th, 2018, and I am here at a local pond which I've never really had a lot of success at. I actually haven't fished this place in several years for that reason. When I first moved down to Monmouth County, I fished this a few times and I caught a total of 1 bass out of those trips. So you might be asking yourself, why am I coming back to a pond where I've never had any success? Well, first of all, it's been several years, maybe things have changed, but second of all, this pond typifies what I would call urban structure. There's a lot of features in this pond that you're not going to find in your idyllic Canadian Shield lakes or other wilderness fishing hotspots, and unless you have access to those kind of areas on a regular basis, there's a good chance that you're limited to fishing ponds that have this kind of urban structure. You know, anybody who lives in an urban or suburban area is pretty much stuck with this kind of stuff unless they pay through the nose to hop a flight into the wilds of Canada. So today, I'd kind of like to make today a tutorial on how to fish urban structure in urban ponds. So, let's get started. Okay, so one of the most prevalent kinds of structure that you'll find in these urban ponds are these concrete walls. Sometimes you'll have almost the entire pond rimmed by these walls, and they're installed for, I guess, flood control, or just to prevent erosion. And when you fish these, a good technique is just to cast right up along next to them and bring the bait parallel to those concrete walls, because a lot of times the fish will be right up next to them, either using them as cover, or on cold days they'll actually get up right next to the wall because they retain heat more than bare soil. So the water next to those seawalls might be a couple degrees warmer, and that's going to attract fish, especially in this time of year when the water's still on the cold side. But another thing you want to key in on is, if you look on the opposite side, is you want to look for structural differences in the wall. So you can see right down there, the wall ends and it turns into like concrete riprap. And whenever you have a transitional area, you know, just like with rock or weeds, you want to fish that, because fish will gravitate towards those edges and they will stage there. So whenever you see some kind of irregular feature in that concrete wall, whether it be a bend or a transition of materials, where it might transition to, you know, from concrete to metal, or if there's just like a place where some pieces have broken off and the rubble's fallen into the water, you want to fish those areas pretty thoroughly. So right there is another feature that you'll find on a lot of urban bodies of water, and that's a drain pipe. A lot of times these urban bodies of water will be used as drainage basins for the townships, and the drain pipes coming in, obviously, when there's water coming out of them, it makes sense because it creates current. The water temp might be different than the rest of the pond, so that makes sense. But even if there's no water coming out, you still want to fish them, because what happens is, when that storm water comes out of the pipe, it actually pushes a lot of the material from the bottom to the sides, and it creates like a 1 or 2 foot depression right at the mouth of that pipe. It might even move away like silt or mud and expose like a harder bottom that fish will relate to. So on these urban ponds, which are often pretty shallow, 1 or 2 feet of depth change can make a ton of difference. So anytime you see a drain pipe, whether there's water coming out of it or not, you definitely want to key in on it. Alright, so here's another pretty common urban pond feature: bridges, road bridges, or in this case, pedestrian bridges. And these pedestrian bridges, in this case, they have pilings that go right down into the water, and the fish will sit next to those pilings and use those as structure. So what you can do is you can either get a target bait like a jig or a worm, and you can just hit each and every one of those pilings one by one, or what you can do is you can take a moving bait and run it by multiple pilings at the same time. So let's say if you're fishing a jig, all you got to do is cast right next to the piling, let it sink down to the bottom, maybe give it a few hops, and then if nothing, you just reel it up and you move right on to the next piling if you can stay out of the tree. Now, in addition to fishing the pilings, you don't want to neglect where the bridge connects to land, because you can see right there, this is what I was getting at before, there's a transition in the seawall. You can kind of see where the connecting point comes out, creates a little bit of a corner, and fish will definitely use that as a point of cover. So you definitely want to fish that too. There's a fish. Nice largie. Oh yeah, good fish. Come on up here. Oh, that's a fatty. Look at this one. Right next to the seawall. This is probably a female getting ready to spawn. Wow, that's a nice fish. Alright. Urban bass fishing. Alright, here's another example of a bridge. This one's got concrete pilings, and you pretty much want to do the same thing that you would do for any other bridge, which is focus on the pilings, because that's normally where the fish are going to be hanging out. Felt that turn into a disaster. Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. I was picking out a backlash. I was picking out a backlash for about 5 minutes. And look what happened. I don't know how long this fish had this in his mouth. Wow. That's one of the craziest catches I think I've ever had. I was literally just, it was starched still on the bottom, this lure. And I was picking out a backlash because I made a bad cast, like I do, and I reel up the slack, this thing's on the end of it. That is unbelievable. Right under the bridge, right next to the bridge piling, just like I said. Jeez. Well, I'd rather be lucky than good. Okay, so right now I'm standing on the end of a windswept point here, which is always a good place to focus your efforts, whether it's an urban pond or not. And an important thing to remember when you are fishing urban ponds is that bass are bass. You know, they'll adapt to their surroundings, only to the point where, you know, they can still practice their normal feeding behavior. So whether a bass is using a tree stump for cover or an old shopping cart, it's going to behave approximately the same way. Take a look out there where that concrete thing is, where all those cormorants are sitting. Sometimes you'll find stuff right in the middle of the pond that somebody put there. In this case, it looks like some kind of a concrete base for something. I'm not 100% sure what. Another time it might be fountains. But anytime you see some kind of a structure sitting right in the middle of the pond, definitely focus on that, because a lot of the times the middle of the pond is a lot deeper, or maybe not a lot deeper, but at least a little bit deeper than the surrounding water. And when you have a piece of structure sitting in that deep water, fish will gravitate towards that, especially if they're gravitating towards deep water anyway. I did want to talk about fountains a little bit today. We haven't run into any because I guess they haven't been installed yet, but fountains are definitely something you want to key on, especially in the summertime, because these urban ponds, in the summertime, they can sometimes have low levels of dissolved oxygen. So those fountains actually throw a little bit of dissolved oxygen back into the water, and a lot of fish will congregate around those just to be more comfortable. So you remember before I was talking about fish using old shopping carts for cover? Well, there's the next best thing. That orange thing in the water right there, that looks like a trash barrel that somebody just threw in here, or maybe blew in during a storm or something. But fish will absolutely use that as cover, so if you see anything like that sitting on the bottom, definitely want to give it a shot, because there might be something using it. Alright, let's talk about this spot real quick and kind of pick it apart. So you've got a drain pipe coming in right here, which means there might be a little bit deeper water, maybe a bit of current. You have a log laying in the water right there. You have this corner, which is normally a productive spot anyway, and then you have a spot where the natural shoreline transitions into that wood seawall. So you've got 4 very prominent pieces of cover all in one spot. And if you're fishing an urban pond, if you see a spot like this, this is money. You want to work this very thoroughly, because chances are there's a fish here. Okay, here's another one of those drain pipes. Now let's address what I was talking about before with the depth change. So let's see if we can find the bottom right here at the discharge. So drop the bait. There's the bottom right there. Okay, so that's maybe a little bit more than a foot, but if you bring it over here, look at that. There's the bottom there, and that's about 6 inches. So you're looking at a difference of about 6 inches, but when you're dealing with a shallow pond, that little bit of depth change can make a big difference. So that's a perfect illustration as to why these drain pipes and culverts are such a good place to key in on. There's a fish. All right. I see a light spot out there. This fish might have actually been on a bed. This might have been the male guarding the nest. Again, I was bringing it in right along the concrete wall. Oh, there's a fish. Looks like it's a concrete wall bite today. 3 of my 4 fish have come right off the wall. There's a fish. I hit it way out in the middle. Little guy. Switched over to a jerkbait just to see what was going on. There we go. Little guy got a face full of jerkbait. This bait I actually had to fix because the lip cracked. A piece cracked off and it wasn't running right. So I had to shave it down. You can see it's like shaved way down. And it doesn't run as deep as it used to, but it works perfectly fine. As you just saw, I mean, it still catches fish. So, you know, little cosmetic surgery wound up saving a $10 jerkbait. Alright, well, I have fished around this entire pond, sampling all of the urban structure that it has to offer. So I think I'm going to wrap things up here. Did not have a crazy day numbers-wise, but I caught a couple of decent fish today. And that's another takeaway you should have from this, is that don't discount urban ponds for big fish. You know, maybe you drive by it every day, maybe you walk your dog next to it, and maybe it doesn't look the best. Maybe there's a lot of trash everywhere. Maybe the geese are using it as a toilet. But just because it doesn't look great doesn't mean there aren't big fish in there. And hopefully you can use some of the tips that you have learned here today, and those will help you catch your next inner city lunker. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and I will see you on the next adventure.